Hi, my name is Jane Hoover and today I want to share something that completely changed my life and my understanding of what comes after. This happened to me in January 2003, during one of the worst winters Boston had seen in decades. I was working as a pediatric nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, and anyone who works in healthcare knows that hospitals never close, no matter how bad the weather gets. We were severely understaffed that winter. A lot of nurses couldn't make it in because of the weather, and those of us who could were pulling double and sometimes triple shifts. I had already been there for 16 hours when everything started happening. I remember looking out the window at the snow just piling up, thinking about how I'd have to somehow drive home in that mess, but honestly, that was the least of my worries at the time. You see, we had this young patient, Tommy, who was battling severe pneumonia. He was just 7 years old, and his condition was getting worse by the hour. The heating system in the pediatric wing had been acting up because of the storm, and we were all running around with blankets, trying to keep the kids warm. I kept going back and forth between the storage room in the basement and the pediatric floor, carrying whatever warm supplies I could find. The basement was freezing, I mean literally freezing. You could see your breath down there, but we needed those supplies. I didn't realize it at the time, but all those trips to the freezing basement in just my scrubs, while I was already exhausted from the double shifts, my body was slowly breaking down. I started feeling a bit off around 2 a.m., but you know how it is in nursing, you just push through. There were kids who needed me, and we were already short-staffed. By 4 a.m., I was starting to cough, but I told myself it was just from the cold air. By 6 a.m., I could feel my chest getting tight, but I kept thinking, just 2 more hours until shift change. I remember checking Tommy's vitals one last time. His fever had finally broken, and he was sleeping peacefully. That's the last clear memory I have before everything went sideways. I was standing at the nurse's station, trying to finish my charts, when the room started spinning. Karen, one of the other nurses, later told me she had asked if I was okay because I looked gray. I apparently tried to say I was fine, but the words came out slurred. The next thing I knew, my legs just gave out. I remember the cold floor against my face, and Karen's voice sounding far away, like she was yelling down a long tunnel. Everything was moving in slow motion. Someone rolled me over, and I could see the fluorescent lights above me, but they were starting to blur together. I tried to take a deep breath, but it felt like my chest was in a vice. The pain was excruciating. Things get a bit jumbled after that. I have flashes of memories, the emergency response team rushing in, someone cutting open my scrub top, the cold shock of the defibrillator pads being placed on my chest. I remember Dr. Rodriguez, our chief of emergency medicine, leaning over me, his face serious as he listened to my chest. The words severe pneumonia and hypoxic floated around me. I knew what those words meant. I was a nurse after all, but in that moment, they felt like they were about someone else. They rushed me down to the emergency department, the same one where I'd done my nursing rotation years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, even in that state. My temperature was 104.2, and my oxygen saturation was dangerously low, somewhere in the 70s. My heart was racing, trying to compensate for the lack of oxygen, and my blood pressure was bottoming out. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was Dr. Rodriguez saying they needed to intubate. I wanted to tell him no, that I just needed a minute to catch my breath, but I couldn't speak. The room was getting darker around the edges, like a tunnel closing in. I could hear the heart monitor beeping faster and faster, and then, nothing. The next part is where everything changes. Where everything I thought I knew about life and death got turned upside down. But here's the thing, even as a medical professional, someone who deals with life and death every day, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. It's difficult to explain what happened next, but I'm going to try my best to put it into words. The first thing I noticed was the silence. After all the chaos, the beeping monitors, the shouting, the squeaking of rubber shoes on linoleum, everything just went quiet. Not a gradual quieting, but an instant, complete silence, like someone had hit a mute button on the world. I remember feeling confused because I could still see the emergency room, but something was different. The perspective was wrong. I was looking down at everything, as if I was floating near the ceiling. I could see Dr. Rodriguez and the team working frantically around a body on the bed, and it took me a moment to realize that body was me. It's a strange thing, seeing yourself like that. My face was gray, almost blue, and they were putting a breathing tube down my throat. But I felt no panic, no fear. Instead, there was this profound sense of peace. I noticed I was surrounded by a soft, rose gold light. It wasn't coming from anywhere specific, it was just there, like I was inside it. And the most remarkable thing was that I could feel this light. Not like you feel sunlight on your skin, this was different. It felt like being immersed in pure love. That's the only way I can describe it. The light seemed to have intelligence, awareness. It knew me, all of me, every thought I'd ever had, every choice I'd ever made, and it loved me completely. As I watched the medical team below, I noticed something extraordinary about their movements. They were working on my body with such dedication, such focus, but around each of them, I could see what looked like trails of colored light, different colors for different emotions. The deep blue of Dr. Rodriguez's concern, the vibrant green of Karen's hope, the purple determination of the respiratory therapist. These colors weren't just visible, I could feel them, understand their meaning on a level that went beyond normal comprehension. That's when I heard the music. Again, music isn't quite the right word, but it's the closest I can get. It was like millions of wind chimes all playing in perfect harmony, creating a symphony that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the universe. The sound began to draw me away from the emergency room scene, and I felt no resistance to following it. The rose gold light around me began to coalesce into what I can only describe as a tunnel or corridor. But this wasn't like any tunnel you might imagine. The walls weren't solid, they were made of living light that shifted and pulsed with colors I've never seen before or since. Colors that don't exist in our normal world. I remember thinking, this is what ultraviolet would look like if we could see it. As I moved through this tunnel, though moved isn't quite right either, because I wasn't walking or flying, I was just being, I became aware of a presence beside me. When I turned, though I had no physical body to turn with, I saw my grandmother, Margaret. She had passed away when I was 12, but here she was, looking exactly as I remembered her from my childhood, but also somehow more real, more vibrant. She wasn't old or sick like she had been in her final years, she was radiant, full of life and joy. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, though she didn't speak with words. It was more like her thoughts simply appeared in my consciousness. "You've grown into such a beautiful healer." I wanted to hug her, to tell her how much I'd missed her, but before I could, two more beings of light appeared beside us. Unlike my grandmother, who had a form I recognized, these beings were more abstract, swirling patterns of light and color that somehow conveyed personality and presence. They introduced themselves as my guides, though again, not with words. Their names, if you could call them that, were impressions rather than sounds. One felt like the moment when dawn breaks over the horizon, the other like the feeling you get when you finally understand a complex problem. They communicated that they had been with me my entire life, watching over me, guiding me toward my path in medicine. Every time I'd had a gut feeling about a patient's condition, every time I'd walked into a room just moments before a child needed help, they had been there, nudging me in the right direction. The tunnel we were moving through began to pulse with scenes from my life, but not like memories, more like living moments I could step into and experience again. I saw myself as a young girl, bandaging my dolls. I saw the moment I decided to become a nurse, sitting beside my grandmother in the hospital during her final days. I saw every patient I'd ever helped, every life I'd touched, but from an entirely new perspective. But the most profound part was that I could feel everything, not just my own emotions, but the ripples of effect that each moment had created in the world. When I saw myself comforting a crying child in the pediatric ward, I could feel how that moment of kindness had changed something in that child's heart, how it would influence their own capacity for compassion years later. Every action, every choice I'd ever made had created waves of effect that spread out through time in ways I'd never imagined. The tunnel continued to unfold before us, and I could sense we were approaching something momentous. The light was growing brighter, the music more complex and beautiful, and there was a feeling of anticipation in the very fabric of this strange space. I knew, somehow, that what I was about to experience would change my understanding of everything: life, death, purpose, and the very nature of reality itself. What happened next was what my guides called the life review, but that term doesn't really capture what it was. Imagine being able to experience every moment of your life simultaneously, feeling not just your own emotions but the emotions of everyone you've ever interacted with. That's what began to unfold around me. The tunnel opened into what seemed like an infinite space, with scenes from my life projected all around me like living, breathing holograms. But these weren't just memories playing back. I was literally reliving each moment, experiencing them from multiple perspectives at once. My grandmother and guides remained with me, offering context and understanding as each scene unfolded. The first scenes they showed me were moments of kindness and healing. I saw myself as a new nurse, staying after my shift to sit with a terrified 4-year-old who was about to go into surgery. At the time, I thought I was just doing my job, but now I could feel the profound impact that simple act of kindness had on that child. I could feel how that moment had helped her develop trust in medical professionals, how it would later influence her to become a doctor herself. The ripple effects of that one small action stretched out through time, touching countless lives. But then came the harder moments. I saw the times I'd been short with patients or colleagues when I was tired or stressed. I felt their hurt, their fear, their disappointment. I experienced the time I'd snapped at a young mother who kept asking questions about her son's medication. I felt her anxiety, her desperate need to protect her child, her shame at feeling like she was bothering me. These moments were almost unbearable because I wasn't just observing them, I was living them from both sides. The most difficult scene was from early in my career, when I'd failed to notice the early signs of deterioration in a young patient. He'd survived, but had to spend extra weeks in the hospital recovering. I experienced not just my own guilt and regret, but his parents' fear and anger, his own confusion and pain. Yet my guides didn't show me this to punish me, they helped me understand how this experience had made me a more attentive nurse, how it had ultimately saved other lives because I never made that same mistake again. Through it all, there was no judgment, only understanding and learning. Every mistake, every triumph, every mundane moment had played its part in shaping not just my life, but the lives of countless others. I saw how relationships I thought were insignificant had profound impacts, how casual words of encouragement had changed the course of people's lives. Then the scenes began to shift. Instead of showing me my past, they began showing me what was yet to come. My guides explained that time doesn't work the same way on their side. Past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, though some futures are more probable than others. The first vision was of a global health crisis that would shake the world to its core. I saw hospitals overwhelmed, healthcare workers in protective gear, people isolated from their loved ones. But I also saw incredible resilience, communities coming together, while staying apart, people finding new ways to connect and support each other. I saw how this crisis would change everything about how we deliver healthcare, how it would force us to innovate and adapt. They showed me advances in medicine that seemed like science fiction, treatments that would target diseases at the genetic level, technologies that could repair damaged organs without surgery. But they also showed me the challenges that would come with these advances, ethical dilemmas, questions of access and equity, the struggle to maintain human connection in an increasingly technological medical system. I saw environmental changes that would impact global health, new diseases emerging as climate shifted, communities struggling to adapt to changing conditions. But alongside these challenges, I saw solutions emerging, new ways of living sustainably, communities becoming more resilient, people finally understanding the connection between environmental and human health. The most striking vision was of a massive shift in consciousness that my guide said was beginning to unfold. I saw people awakening to their interconnectedness, beginning to understand that the health of one affects the health of all. I saw healthcare evolving beyond just treating physical symptoms to addressing the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. But they were clear that these weren't guaranteed futures, they were possibilities whose likelihood depended on the choices we would make. They showed me two potential paths, one of division, fear, and increasing illness, and another of unity, understanding, and healing. The difference between these paths, they explained, would be determined by millions of individual choices, including my own. Throughout these visions, I noticed certain dates and numbers appearing repeatedly. The guides explained that these would be markers, signposts to help me recognize when certain events were approaching. They told me to pay particular attention to the number sequence 333, though they didn't explain exactly what it meant. Just that I would understand when the time came. As these visions faded, I felt myself being drawn towards something even more profound, a presence that seemed to be the source of all the light and love I'd been experiencing. But before I could fully enter into it, my guides indicated there was something crucial I needed to understand about my own future, something that would explain why I had to make a choice about returning. As I was being drawn toward that incredible presence of light and love, my grandmother and guides brought me to what they called the chamber of choice. It wasn't really a chamber in any physical sense, it was more like a state of being where all possibilities existed simultaneously. Here, they showed me something that changed everything. "Look," my grandmother said, gesturing to what appeared to be two small lights hovering between us. They were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, two perfectly formed spheres of pure, golden light, pulsing in perfect synchronization. I knew instantly, with a certainty that went beyond rational thought, that I was looking at souls. But not just any souls. "Your children," my grandmother said, though again, not in words. "They're waiting to begin their journey." I was confused at first. I wasn't pregnant, wasn't even in a relationship at the time. But they showed me that these souls had already chosen me as their mother. They were twins, a boy and a girl, and they had a specific purpose for coming to Earth at this particular time. The guides showed me glimpses of their future lives. The boy would become a pioneering researcher in regenerative medicine, developing treatments that would save countless lives. The girl would become a bridge between traditional medicine and spiritual healing, helping to transform how we think about healthcare. But there was more. They showed me how these children would be part of a larger wave of souls coming to help humanity through the challenging times ahead. Special souls, my guides explained, need special mothers. They showed me how everything in my life, my career in nursing, even this near-death experience, had been preparing me to raise these remarkable children. That's when they presented me with the choice. I could stay in this place of incredible peace and love, this place that felt like home, or I could return to complete this mission. They were clear that it was entirely my choice. There was no pressure, no judgment either way. They showed me both paths, the profound peace and continued growth I would experience if I stayed, and the challenges but also the incredible joy and purpose that awaited me if I returned. I was torn. The love and peace in this realm were beyond anything I'd ever experienced. The thought of leaving it behind was almost unbearable. But when I looked at those two precious lights, when I saw the future they could help create, I knew what I had to do. Just as I made my decision to return, the beings of light surrounding us began to share what they called gifts, abilities and understanding I would need for the journey ahead. They showed me how to recognize signs and synchronicities, how to trust my intuition even more deeply than before. They explained that I would be given a heightened sensitivity to energy, especially around my future patients. You'll know when someone is ready to cross over, they said. You'll be able to help them and their families through the transition. They also gave me what they called the gift of time, an ability to sense when time is running short for a patient, allowing me to ensure that necessary conversations happen and goodbyes are said. But they were very clear about one thing: these gifts weren't for my personal benefit, but for service to others. The return itself was nothing like the peaceful journey that had brought me to this place. It felt like being pulled backward through a storm of energy. All the physical pain that had been absent in the spiritual realm came rushing back. I could feel my lungs struggling, my body fighting against the infection that had nearly killed it. The peace and expansiveness of the spiritual realm began to compress back into the limitations of physical form. The first sensation I became aware of was the breathing tube in my throat, a horrible, choking feeling. I could hear voices around me, urgent but excited. She's fighting the ventilator. Blood pressure's coming up. Get Dr. Rodriguez in here. I tried to open my eyes, but they felt like they were weighted down with lead. When I finally managed to open them, the first thing I saw was Karen's face, her eyes wide with surprise and relief. The clock on the wall behind her read 3:33 a.m., the first confirmation of what my guides had told me about paying attention to that number sequence. The recovery was difficult. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital, fighting my way back to health. But even in those early days, I could feel that something fundamental had changed. I could sense things about my patients that I couldn't explain through medical knowledge alone. I knew when families needed to be called in, knew when someone was about to take a turn for the better or worse. 3 months after my experience, I found out I was pregnant. With twins. According to the ultrasound calculations, they had been conceived within days of my return. When they were born, a boy and a girl, just as I'd been shown, the time of birth was recorded as 3:33 p.m. This experience changed everything about how I practice nursing. I still believe in science and medicine, they're essential tools for healing. But I now know they're not the whole picture. There's so much more to life, death, and healing than what we can measure and quantify. I've learned to balance both worlds, to use my medical training alongside these deeper understandings I was given. It's been 20 years since my near-death experience, and not a day goes by that I don't draw upon what I learned on the other side. The changes in my life weren't just personal, they rippled out to affect everything and everyone around me. I want to share how this experience transformed not just my understanding of death, but my whole approach to life and healing. The most immediate change was in how I practice nursing. After my return, I found I had an almost uncanny ability to sense what my patients needed, beyond their medical requirements. I could walk into a room and instantly know if someone was silently struggling, if they needed to talk, or if they were preparing to transition. This gift the guides gave me, I started calling it my knowing, became an integral part of my practice. I remember one night, about 6 months after my return, when I felt an urgent need to check on a young patient who was recovering from routine surgery. All his vitals had been stable, there was no medical reason for concern, but something was pulling me to his room. When I got there, I found him in the early stages of a severe allergic reaction to his new medication. The doctors later said that if we'd caught it even 10 minutes later, he might not have made it. These kinds of incidents happened so frequently that my colleagues started joking that I had a sixth sense about patients. They didn't know how right they were. The twins, Michael and Sarah, were born exactly as I'd been shown. Their birth itself was remarkable. Despite being twins, the delivery was surprisingly easy, almost as if they were being helped along by unseen hands. As they grew, it became clear that they were indeed special, but not in the dramatic, supernatural way some might imagine. Their gifts manifested in their extraordinary empathy, their natural understanding of healing, and their ability to see connections that others missed. Michael showed an incredible aptitude for science from an early age. By the time he was 10, he was already asking sophisticated questions about cellular regeneration. Now, at 20, he's in medical school, focusing on regenerative medicine, just as I was shown. His professors say his approach to research is revolutionary. He seems to intuitively understand how the body's healing mechanisms work. Sarah took a different path, but one equally focused on healing. She began practicing meditation at 12 and started studying various healing traditions from around the world. She has an incredible gift for helping people understand the connection between their physical symptoms and their emotional or spiritual struggles. Now she's developing a program to integrate spiritual support into conventional medical treatment, working with several major hospitals. But raising spiritually gifted children came with its own challenges. How do you explain to a 5-year-old why they need to keep quiet about seeing angels around sick patients? How do you help teenagers balance their extraordinary sensitivities with the normal struggles of adolescence? The guides hadn't shown me these day-to-day challenges, but looking back, I understand that figuring these things out was part of my own growth. My experience also changed how I relate to death and dying. In my work, I frequently deal with end-of-life situations, and my perspective on these moments is completely transformed. I no longer see death as something to fear or as a failure of medical intervention. Instead, I recognize it as a transition, a change of state rather than an ending. This understanding has allowed me to help countless families through the loss of loved ones, sharing just enough of my experience to offer comfort without overwhelming them. The gift of time the guides gave me has proven invaluable in my work with terminal patients. I've been able to create opportunities for important conversations, for reconciliations, for proper goodbyes. Sometimes it's as simple as suggesting that a family member might want to stay a little longer, or gently encouraging someone to express what's in their heart. These moments have become sacred to me, windows of opportunity where healing can happen even when cure is impossible. One of the most profound changes has been in my understanding of what healing really means. Before my experience, I saw healing primarily in physical terms, symptoms improving, wounds closing, infections clearing. Now I understand that true healing often has little to do with physical recovery. Sometimes the deepest healing happens when a person comes to peace with their condition, when relationships are mended, or when old emotional wounds are finally addressed. The guides' warnings about the future have proven startlingly accurate. When the global pandemic hit, I recognized it immediately from my visions. But more importantly, I understood its deeper purpose, how it would force us to reevaluate our connections, our priorities, our whole approach to healthcare. My experience had prepared me to help others navigate this challenging time, to find meaning in the struggle, and to recognize the opportunities for growth hidden within the crisis. I've also come to understand that the number sequences I was shown, particularly 333, appear at crucial moments of choice or change. They've become like signposts, helping me navigate important decisions. But I've learned that these signs aren't meant to tell me what to do, rather, they remind me to pay attention, to tune into that deeper wisdom I connected with during my experience. If there's one message I feel compelled to share from my experience, it's this: we are all far more connected than we realize, and every action we take creates ripples that affect countless others. The guides showed me that healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, never happens in isolation. Every time we choose love over fear, compassion over judgment, or understanding over ignorance, we contribute to the healing of the whole. I'm sharing my story now because the guides showed me that a time would come when these experiences would need to be spoken about more openly. They showed me that humanity is approaching a crucial juncture, a time when we'll need to choose between fear and love, between division and unity. My experience, and others like it, are meant to remind us that there's more to our existence than what we can see and measure, that love is real, and that we're never truly alone. The depth of love and acceptance I experienced on the other side remains with me, a constant reminder of what's possible, what's real, what matters. While I can never fully describe that love in human terms, I can share its effects, its guidance, its healing. And that, perhaps, is the greatest gift I was given, not just the experience itself, but the ability to share its light with others.